Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar. My name is John Kammerer. I am the account manager with the Monticello team at Satori Software. Today we're going to talk about post-presort software, what it can do for you, and why you might want to consider using it. And we thought that the best way to go about this would be to have a discussion with one of our existing customers so that you can hear firsthand about their experiences. So today we want to welcome Gail Frissa, who is going to be joining us. Good afternoon, Gail.
Hey, John. How are you?
Good, Gail. Gail's a manager at PromptDirect in Staten Island, New York. So Gail, tell us about PromptDirect and what you specialize in.
Well, okay, John. Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here and welcome everybody. PromptDirect has been in business for over 30 years, and we've actually recently rebranded, which has included a name change. We used to be known as Prompt Mailers, and now, of course, we're known as PromptDirect, and of course, that's to better reflect the multi-channel marketing services we now provide as many mailers are going towards. So more simply put, we're not just a mail house anymore. So in addition to traditional mailing and fulfillment services, we also offer comprehensive data management analysis services and cross-media marketing services such as email, QR codes, mobile SMS, pearls, and social media that complement mailings, or they could be standalone marketing strategies. And that's basically what we do.
Great. So how big are the jobs that you normally process?
Well, you know, although we process jobs anywhere from under 100 pieces to several million, I would say that our niche is generally in the 25 to 50,000 piece range.
Okay, and how many jobs per week on average would you be processing?
We process approximately 100 to 150 per week. We use Monticello right now for about 10 to 15 jobs a week. However, that's going to be changing very soon.
So why the change, Gail?
Well, we'll see what happens, you know, in 2014 with the USPS regulations with regard to electronic documentation requirements for automation rates, and that's where it's going to be pretty soon.
Great. So, so why did you bring in the post-presort software?
Well, believe it or not, we were originally using another post-presort program solely for an interface that it provided that enabled us to capture mail drop counts and postage that went into our in-house mailing software. And but then we began to use the software for Mail.dat editing and electronic documentation, while we were completing testing for full service certification. And we started to look to cut expenses, as most mailers do, and to increase efficiency in this process. And we began to research other post-sort programs and decided on Monticello. You know, Monticello offered us an efficient program for the right price that we needed to facilitate for full-service e-doc requirements.
So do you still produce paper statements?
You know, actually, we do still produce paper statements whenever we can. We have a separate data processing area that produces a Mail.dat upon completion of a pre-sort. But honestly, if we can skip that step, we do. But, and there's a big but there, if the Postal Service follows through with their requirements for full-service e-docs in January 2014, we will be processing probably about 90% of our jobs through Monticello.
Well, that's certainly encouraging. So do you do partial releases of the mail jobs?
Sure, absolutely we do. You know, larger jobs are typically set up here so that we can drop ship to multiple entry points, and that's according to a delivery schedule that takes into account proximities, which means it could be done over a few days or even a week. And the great thing is that we only need one Mail.dat for this. So we simply select the entry points within one job on Monticello. We go ahead and we assign the mail dates, and if the mail schedule is firm, we upload just one file to Postal One. And if production is not complete, you know, as we're dropping, we usually upload a plan file to Postal One, and then we upload paid postage files to Postal One as the production is completed. We can't do this with our pre-sort software. You have to have a post-sort software to do that.
So the software keeps track of that partial release, and then when you come in the next day, you know exactly what portion of the job has not been released or paid for?
Exactly. Exactly. It works great.
Good. So do you need to make corrections to things like the piece weight, mailing dates, or other information after pre-sort?
Yeah, absolutely. We have 6 different data processing programmers who may be working on the wrong Mail.dat customer template, or they choose the wrong method of payment. Sometimes they forget their email addresses. They forget to specify an AIC permit. Also, I've never seen a job whose weight did not have to be adjusted at the last minute. And in this business, anything can happen at the last minute. And the last thing you want to have to do is go back and either update a Mail.dat or re-pre-sort. So Monticello is efficient in this way. It's very flexible, and it allows us to handle all the last-minute changes very quickly so that we can meet our mail date deadlines.
So speaking about Postal One and eDoc, how does the pre-validation feature help with Postal One submissions?
It's a very handy little feature. Monticello has it set up so that it checks for the most common Postal One errors when you attempt to create a Postal One file. And it gives you on-the-spot information about that. It's an instant result, and it's very easily read. You can understand very easily what the error is, and that's unlike the Postal One client upload site. I don't know if anybody's had familiar with that, but especially when we first started testing, it was very difficult, and I know that was one of their objectives, to make it a little simpler, but it's still difficult to understand what the errors are and where they come from.
So the other option, in lieu of a pre-validation of this data that you're going to submit to Postal One, would be that you could submit the Mail.dat jobs directly to Postal One.
Right.
So let's talk about spoilage. How do you handle spoilage?
Well, but Postal One requires, obviously, that a mailer account for all their pieces in a mailing. And we simply use the spoilages and shortages function on Monticello, and we delete containers that we don't want to mail. We cut it at the container level, and they'll tell us exactly what containers are not mailing, and we take them off. And we most often use the pay postage with plan file function, where we upload both as one. And then if there's a shortage involved, it's also accounted for in that file. So everything is in that one file. It's really a terrific feature.
So what you're suggesting is that in most mailing operations, after pre-sort but before the mail's released, there are other processing steps that have to take place before the mail's released.
Right, and you never know what's going to happen. So a plan to mail something is one thing, but in reality, what really happens, they can be two totally different things. At the pre-sort level, you have a count and you have this intention. But when you get down to the production level, it's a totally different thing.
All right. So in the postage, we talked a little bit about the postage statement. On the postage 8125C, can you explain that, how that is helpful when shipping multiple jobs on the same day?
Well, for example, we have a customer that we do consolidated drop shipments for multiple jobs that have different weights. And how we used to do this is that we would calculate the mail weight going to each entry point, and we'd manually make out the 8125s, making sure we had the correct address for each entry point, which, as everybody knows, is a moving target these days with all the post office closures. And with Postage DB on Monticello, we simply highlight all of the jobs that we want, and we create the 8125s in one shot. So we've created this 8125 template in Monticello where all we literally have to do is just go in and type the job number, and we print them all at once. It's a terrific feature.
Well, we spent a few minutes here talking about some of the things that occur in mail processing after pre-sort and the way that you're handling this. And just a quick note here, and that is that all the functionality and features that we're talking about are the result of 2 full-time developers here at Monticello both of which have spent the last 18 years strictly on Mail.dat. That is our total focus. So in another area of software support, can you share your experience, what your experience has been with Monticello as far as customer support goes?
Well, I would say it's like going back to a system that really worked, except Monticello, I think, has always worked this way. You simply pick up the phone and call, and you work through your problem or question that way. I mean, we work with Dan at Monticello, and he can talk to any employee here at whatever their specific technical level is, which is so refreshing. And, honestly, I don't miss the typical help desk system, and I think Monticello does it right.
Well, we do put a lot of emphasis in customer support, and this is a key question. Overall, since we've been talking about this post-presort software, how do you feel that the cost of this software can be justified for a medium to small mailer?
Well, I think no matter how small of a mailer you are, your customer is going to eventually ask for a service that is going to require electronic documentation. That's number one. And, it's interesting because I asked our data processing manager just recently if our presort program could do all of the things that we can do with Monticello, and here's what we found. Our presort program can change a weight and dimensions and mail date to the extent that it doesn't compromise the actual presort. But there are quite a few things that Monticello handles for us that presort program can't. For example, we use an outside vendor for co-palletization mailings. We produce a Mail.dat and we send it to them. They analyze the file and they reconfigure the Mail.dat according to their shipment program, and then they send this newly configured Mail.dat back to us. We import the newly configured Mail.dat into Monticello, and we fix whatever we need to fix at the last minute, depending on production, from there, and we upload it to Postal 1. We cannot, however, import that Mail.dat back into our presort program because it's a different Mail.dat than what was originally created. So, another example is that we also receive Mail.dats from another customer whose list company sends them to us. And I think mailers are going to come across this more often now. You may not be doing the data processing on your mailing jobs. It may come from an outside source. So you're going to be getting a Mail.dat. Well, what do you do with that? You need a program like Monticello to accept a Mail.dat and be able to configure it for your needs for electronic documentation. In addition to this, I mean, those are just two examples in addition to this, and then, John can expand on this. Monticello can set different mail dates for different entry points, like I described when we mail partials. We can change a tray type, let's say, to an EMM tray. We can create an overflow tray. Those are just a couple of examples of some of the different functions that we've used, and we have probably haven't tapped into, all of it yet. There's much more to discover there.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. That was a good answer. So how have you licensed the Monticello automation module?
Well, we use the Monticello robot, and we use that to automatically upload Mail.dats directly into Monticello, which works very nicely in the background, and I believe it'll get some real use next year with the full service eDoc requirements when they really come into effect.
Well, particularly on a daily basis where you're uploading a lot of postage jobs to the Mail.dat, and if those jobs are automatically uploaded, that can save a lot of time. Absolutely. So I guess we touched on this earlier, but can you explain why it's so critical to become a full-service approved mailer by January 2014?
Well, I guess it would only be necessary if you want to continue offering your customer automation rates. Otherwise you should be okay. But, obviously I think that it's going to be extremely important. I think the post office, I think historically has said they're going to do one thing, and then sometimes they put that off. But I don't know why anybody would want a chance waiting too long to really become certified for this, because, if they do it and you're not ready, it's going to be a problem.
Well, that's right. And, I heard the other day from one of the postal people, they said the smart mailers are going ahead with full service approval right now. They're not going to wait until the last quarter when it's going to be a possible log jam and they won't be able to get approved.
That's right.
One of our recent customers did some calculating on what it would cost them. They're a very large insurance company. They do a lot of mailing. And they calculated that not having the automation discount would cost them $300,000 a year. So it can be sizable if you're not going to be getting that automation discount, and obviously if you're not full service. So that kind of spells out the need for getting on board as soon as possible with the full service. So,
right.
So what was involved in getting approved for full service?
Well, we actually became full service approved shortly after it was available. The process involved several steps. First, let's say we had to apply for a mailer ID and CRID. We had to learn what they were, of course, first. And then we had to gather all of the barcode identifiers that we would need. We had to plan for feedback services such as tracking and address correction data and such so that we could build that into the barcode. And then, of course, that was tested and retested. You know, whether you're using an outside source for your feedback services or you're using the post office, you still have to incorporate that into your barcode, and that involves some testing. We had to develop a new job naming system because you have to keep all of your mail sequence numbers unique, and and then we had to design our pallet placards, which were now required, and then lastly we had to go through the Postal One eDoc testing system called TEM to be approved for uploading basic and full service eDocs, and this was one of my jobs, and this really took some time. We were then able to train employees that we have in our production office that prepare the postage statements to use Monticello and the Postal One system. And when we had last-minute changes in productions, these employees were able to make the changes to the eDocs pretty efficiently. I'm not going to say that this was, this is easy as whiting out a field on a postage statement, but I guess, we all have to accept that those days are long gone.
What kind of time element would you say that mailers can count on to get approved for full service?
As far as the electronic documentation is concerned, I don't know, maybe a month or so. They're going to be testing back and forth. They have to become really familiar with the DAT mails. I think Monticello is probably going to make it pretty easy. At the time, we had done it when it first came out, so it was a little bit more difficult. The errors that you were getting back on the client upload site were difficult to read. It sometimes was like finding a needle in a haystack. Now I think it's a little bit easier, but I would say to allow for a month.
Okay. So lastly, what would you say are the most significant advantages to using this post-presort program that we've been talking about, rather than relying on a presort program to upload the eDocs to Postal One?
Well, number one, as I just mentioned, we brought Monticello software down to our production office area. We don't have programmers down there. These are, pretty entry-level office workers, and they're on top of the pulse of what's happening in production. So the fact that we've been able to bring the software down and teach them this software, and they can work with this software as the production needs arise, that's great. They can make those last-minute changes that they need to make so that we can make our mailing deadlines. And we don't have to go back up to the programmers and ask them to drop what they're doing and update a Mail.dat. And, the workflow is much more efficient. I would say, secondly, there are constant changes being made by the post office, and it's enough for us to keep up with changes that affect mail design and the actual production of mail, but to compound that with all of the changes that are involved at this stage of documentation and delivery would absolutely be mind-boggling. I think Monticello handles all of that, and that lifts a big burden off of us.
That's really a good point. I had one of our customers tell me the other day, he said, there's so many changes that are coming down the pike as far as Postal One and full service. He said, we can't begin to comprehend, much less implement all of them. And he said, but we know that you don't have a choice. And he said, that's why we license your software. So that says a lot there. Well, Gail, we've actually exchanged a lot of information, and you've been very helpful. I will remind our audience that this session has been recorded, so if you were taking notes and didn't quite get all the information, you will have access to a recording of our session this afternoon. We will entertain any further questions that you might have, and you can do this in writing. I hope the session has been helpful, and I think that you probably have my contact information, so that if there are any further questions, or if there's any additional information that you would like, you can contact me, and my phone number and email address is on the slide. We want to thank you, our audience today, for participating in the webinar. And once again, you can stay on if you have additional questions, or if you feel free to leave the webinar at your choice.